For our 11:30, we have our branch-focused CX industry expert coming up. This will be Jean-Pierre. He is the president and founder of Shikatani Lacroix Design, and will be joining us today to discuss how branch-focused customer experiences can increase advice-driven services, which I'm really interested to hear how this goes. So JP, over to you, sir.
Thank you. Love your socks.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking for the clicker. Clicker's not here. Could somebody bring the pickle? Oh, I found it. Okay. All right. The slides are moving. All right. So I'm Jean-Pierre Lacroix. People call me JP for ease of use. People say, what do you do? And I say, well, we are a customer experience transformation agency. We help bridge the physical, digital, and human aspect of any consumer experience. And we specialize in the banking sector. We have a lot of folks in this room, RBC, TD, Scotiabank, US Bank, regions in the US, and then a whole swath of Chinese banks that we're currently involved in. People also ask, what's your core purpose? And we inspire the future of customer experiences because people need to be inspired. If we're going to generate transformation, they need to be excited about the change. They need to be excited about where the change is going to lead them. And to do that, we need to drive insights. We need to educate, break down the silos, break down the biases. And so we do a lot of research, and I'm going to share today a combination of about 4 major studies. And we come to these conferences to learn, get the check mark. Yeah, we're doing the same thing. We're on track. What we're doing is what the industry is doing, and we're not falling behind. And also it's to kind of open up conversations that maybe we're not having, or thoughts that maybe are there, but they haven't bubbled to the top. And so this topic that I'm going to be talking about, which is all about advice, and advice experiences, hasn't been talked a lot. I mean, this morning, humanizing transformation, absolutely bringing humans into the equation of transformation is really important. This is a barcode. If you want to scan it, we have the full study. And at the end of this presentation, I will have this slide pop up again. So here's the number I want you to remember, 57%. That is the gap based on our study that financial institutions, those are insurance companies, they're wealth management companies, they're credit unions, they're banks, need to fill. And why this number is important, and we'll share how we've arrived at this number, what this number means for you. But what's really important is that if you don't narrow this gap, all this CX stuff, really nice to have, is not going to deliver the results. Because CX is creating the platform to deliver the experience, but the experience is delivered by solving customers' needs. And we're going to talk about those. So, that was a move. Skip the slide. Okay, so you like data. So 23, and that's the Canadian part of the study, 23,000 respondents. We did a global study on this. The reality is if you look at the relationship you have today, the fact is your relationship is very transactional with your customers. Yeah, you could argue that wealth management and insurance, you've kind of moved up that ladder. But the reality is the day-to-day interaction you're having with your customers are very much transactional. But the problem with that is you're really not solving the unmet needs of your customers, because your customers today have a high degree of anxiety. You've got the baby boomers entering retirement. Do I have enough money to retire? Did I make the right investments? Can I afford to retire? Do I need to take a second job? Kids at their life stages, buying their first home, there's a lot of anxiety. Gen Zs, millennials, there's a lot of anxiety in the marketplace. Obviously, the recession, inflation, high cost of living, those play to those anxiety levels. And they're looking at their financial institutions, because you are the access to wealth and access to money, which is the fuel to their future, they're looking for you for advice. And it's great. We talk about mobile, digital. What's the one conversation we haven't had yesterday and today? What's the one conversation? What was the one thing that didn't enter anyone's conversation? All the presenters. One thing. The branch, the physical asset. No one talked about the physical asset. Talked about the advisors, the frontline staff, talked about, the digital networks, data, but we didn't talk about the physical aspect. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Digital has made banking a lot easier. Yeah, 50% of consumers' primary channel is mobile, and that's going to continue to grow. Mobile will be the primary banking channel for the next generation when it comes to transactional relationship. And I want to emphasize transactional relationships. You're doing a really good job. And yes, they're really happy with, there's always areas of improvement, but when you rate the experience of mobile, and actually in-branch experience, they actually rate you really well. There's obviously room for improvement, but when you aggregate consumers and their responses, they're saying, yeah, I'm pretty happy with what you're doing. There's always areas of improvement. But here's the caveat. Here's the watch out. The watch out is the more you drive consumers to digital-only platform, the more you make it convenient for them to only do their banking online, you're seeding attrition. You're seeding attrition. You're actually making them easier. And we call it silent attrition. We did a big study, 2017. We wanted to find out, are customers leaving banks? If they are they going to fintechs? Where are they going? The reality is they're going to other institutions. Yeah, they're going to fintechs, but less so, surprisingly, at that moment. And they're leaving, but not telling you so. So they're leaving you for the wealth products that you want to make your money on, and they're keeping their transactional, their bank accounts with you, but they're not using them, dormant. And I presented this slide, and it was a bit of a wake-up. And here's the stats here show that. And ask yourself the question, I'm sure you've got research to validate this within your organization. The more your customers use all your channels, and I heard it this morning, I think it was from Jill, all your channels, the more loyal they are. So true. The more you move them to an online-only channel, the higher the attrition rate is. So the idea here is to ensure your customers use all your channels and humanize those channels. So they did, pandemic has accelerated digital. We've all heard that. We know, we saw the numbers. Call centers went right to the roof, shift to online, even the older generation. But it's also ushered in a need to close branches. We call it upsizing, right-sizing the physical channel. A lot of institutions right now, I was speaking at a conference in the US, are looking at closing their branches or relocating them and readjusting their channel to reflect the fact that fewer and fewer consumers are going to their branches. The branch still remains a really important factor. But in that closure of financial branches, it triggers negative. In our study, 33% of respondents in North America indicated their branch had closed or relocated, which led to customers having a significant defection and dissatisfaction with their institution when those branches closes. Because you're forcing them, we heard this morning and yesterday, customers don't like to be forced into a channel. They like to have the choice of their channel. So when you close that branch, are you giving them a choice of their channel? I don't think so. Right? You're forcing them to go online. And we look at the attrition in Canada versus the US. In Canada, because there are fewer institutions, they're forced to go online. So they don't really leave us as much as in the US. In the US, it's a signal with 6,300 different financial institutions. The attrition is much higher, but they're unhappy. And when you start looking at the growth segment for you, the younger consumers, that impact is significantly higher. So closing branches, yes, you need to have a strategy for closing the branches, and you need to repurpose what that physical asset should be delivering for your customers. Because we know that the physical branch, the physical asset where consumers connect with human beings, your sales associates, your advisors, is where growth. This is where you're selling your growth products. This is where you can engage your customers to buy more of the value-added services that actually drive the growth of your organizations. But also, by closing, it's one of the key factors of dissatisfaction with customers. So we talked about yesterday multi-channel, omni-channel. It's a journey, right? Well, I'll tell you that the new term that we need to start adopting, and we heard it this morning, is seamless experience. It's the evolution of what omni-channel is. It's the evolution of multi-channel. It's the way the customer wants to be treated. Not so much how we've structured the channels, much more about how they want to engage with those channels. We asked the question in our study, we did a study in the fall last year, what defines a seamless experience for banking? And a seamless experience is about access to all banking channels and bank experts. Right? They're looking for people, they're looking for advice. That defines them. And I asked this morning, are there breaks in this seamless experience? Are there breaks, areas? And we found out there's a chasm of a break. And that chasm stops at the branch, at the physical asset doors. You guys do a great job of collecting that data and driving it to mobile online. But how that links to the physical experience inside the branch or the advice center, there's a big gap. We heard this morning Sean talked a little bit about his experience of that seamless and how amazing it was because they were one step ahead of you. That's seamless, right? Don't have to repeat yourself. They know who you are. They know why you're there. They know what you're looking for, and they've actually devised the information that you're looking for. The other thing that's really important that came out of our study is irrespective of the channel, they want to talk to people. They want to have the choice to talk to people. They want you to humanize that experience, that advice, solving that issue, right? Resolving a transaction. They wanted to have the choice to speak to people. So as you force them into all this excitement about AI chatbots and all of this fun stuff, that's okay. There's a segment of the customers are going to be comfortable with that. But there's also a big segment of the population who will want to talk to an advisor, a human being. And more importantly, the branch still remains, the physical asset still remains a place for people to interact with financial services. 70% of consumers frequent branches. What surprised me in our study was only 6% of respondents indicated they never go to a branch. Only 6%. So there's a lot of misconception. Gen Zs don't go to branches. Not true. They're actually one of the largest percentage of people who go to branches because they're looking for advice, they're looking for help, they're establishing their financial security. They need that hand-holding. I mean, they've been coddled all their life. Why wouldn't you coddle them? Because that's what they're expecting. That's what their parents have done. And then when you look at the younger consumers, the younger consumers' their primary bank is in their institution. We also looked at, U.S. Bank asked us, GP, we just acquired Union Bank, how does branch renovations impact loyalty? And what's interesting is we saw a 20% increase in visitation and interest in products of the financial institution as part of their study. And so I socialized this with bankers last week, and they said, you're right, GP, because you know what? The consumer, there's been a lot of branch closures, and my branch is really old. It's 10, 15 years old. The paint, the furniture's worn. Why would I give you all my business? You may be closed next week or next month. I may have to go to another financial institution. Why would I make a commitment to you? Because I'm not sure you're committed to my community. But you renovate the branch, what's the signal you're saying? We're here. We're staying. We recognize we need to change. So we talked about the gap. There's a significant gap in the ideal customer experience, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. And that gap, that 57%, when we ask consumers, what's the relationship you have with your primary financial institution? Only 5% said a resource for professional financial advice. Right? But when we ask them, where do you want to get that financial advice? Where do you go to get that financial advice? 62% said the ideal advice experience is in the branch, in the physical experience. And that's because there's people in those physical experiences. There's empathy. There's dialogue. There's conversations. Really hard to do digitally. And then we asked them the question, ideal experience for financial institutions to deliver outstanding financial advice. And what they said to us, a financial wellness center supported by non-related banking expertise across all channels. 50% said that. That supports a major study. There's a book, if you go to our booth, on the future of retail banking. We did that study in, I think, 2016. And it was a global study that we looked at what's the behavior of consumers and what's the value of retail banking and what are they looking for. And what they're looking for is advice beyond banking. They're looking for an ecosystem. So if I'm a small, and I heard Marketplace yesterday and I was so excited because that's just the beginning of the opportunity. It's about solving people's entire life based on their life stages or needs and segmenting those needs, those branches based on those customers. And 72% indicating providing financial advice is critical to driving loyalty, driven by Gen Z. So when you start looking at the levers of change, the levers of driving growth, the levers of increased sales, advice, human-centered advice is at the core of this. We did a major study of, I think it's 10 countries, 60 financial institutions in February across US, Canada, Asia, Europe. And what was interesting is we were trying to find what's the trigger for defection. We had done the attrition study in 2017. I wonder, what's the attrition driver? When you looked at the customer satisfaction, there's ups and downs, but I'll call it the range is narrow. Yeah, GD Powers goes, TD's 10, RBC's 1. When you look at that range, the difference, it's actually very narrow. So the reality is competitive advantage of customer service, it's very competitive. You guys are all playing effectively. What we found out was, other than security, which is the key driver, if you have a security leak, they're all going to leave you, quality of advice was a key factor in driving attrition. The quality of advice you provide your customers is a key way they evaluate the relationship they have with you. Not how convenient you are or seamless. And what we found out in our study was, when you look at how satisfied are you with all of these different things, the services, rates, insurance, checking and savings, at the bottom was it financial advice. Now, Canada, US does a better job of financial advice. It's more competitive, I would say, than Canada. However, we say, okay, if you got that financial advice, what would you expect it to be? They're saying find ways to save money while investing in their well-being drives and increased deposit investments. It's about them. Finding ways to save money surprised us. But when you look at the anxiety, my second slide, and you look at the problem you're solving, we heard this morning and yesterday, what's the hidden need states that we need to solve as financial institutions, insurance companies, or investment? It's about finding ways of saving money or protecting our money. So what does this all mean? What are the strategic implications? I think the first opportunity is to shift mindset from transaction to service. You've done a fantastic job as an industry or industries to make banking more comfortable, make it more convenient. Right? There's still a journey. We did a big study on the state of physical digital in healthcare, retail, and banking. The banking, we're far ahead of anybody else, but there's still areas, conflicting priorities, lack of resources. There's still some challenges faced in this CX digital transformation, but this mindset If you changed the way you looked at your business and you only used one filter, financial advice, what would you do differently? How would you engage with customers? What's the role of the channels? And in our study, we actually get deep down, we don't have time for it, into what channel are they looking for when they look for advice. And no, I don't want to offend anybody, mobile's not the place they go for. A bit of online, but mobile definitely not the place they go for. The other one, as I talked about, is humanizing your omni-channel. It's really important that irrespective of the channel your customers are using, that they have access to real people. It's a competitive advantage. It's empathy. It's recognizing them as an important level of importance. Opportunity number 3 is to answer emotional needs with solutions, not products. I would say that, and maybe I'm wrong, so would you say, though, that the biggest barrier for transformation in this industry is that you're a product-driven, monitored, measured organization? Would you, anybody disagree? Anybody agree with that? Would you raise your hand? Or are you too embarrassed to raise your hand? Don't raise your hand. There you go. Good for you. The reality is how you get measured in a bank or wealth management. I was talking to my broker. I said, as a broker, if you really cared about my well-being, why are you just selling me stocks? I should have been buying real estate. Why wouldn't you put me in touch with a broker to do real estate? Because you're looking at my whole financial picture versus looking at what you're selling, which is stocks. So look at solutions and answer their emotional need. And there are tools out there, as I mentioned yesterday. And then the physical asset, and we've got a lot of, in the study, things you need to do in your physical asset, is shift the message from transaction to consultation. This is US Bank. The first cue is eliminate the queue lines. There's technology that you can adopt right in your financial institution, in your branches, so that customers can queue electronically so they don't have to wait in line. Because when they're sitting is when they're comfortable. When they're sitting is where they read. When they're sitting, and we did the big study for one of the banks, when they're sitting is where they absorb information on digital signage. It's not when they're standing or they're frustrated because they've been waiting too long. So look at your customer physical experience. Now, how do you pivot? How do you communicate that you're in the advice business versus the transaction? It's really important. Then the last opportunity, and I'll open up to some questions. And at this, I'm in a little bit of a bandwagon on this one. I've been talking about this first time I presented this was in China. On the banking industry model needs to change. The model you have today, you're putting a lot of attention on channels. The model you have today is broken. It's broken. It's broken. We're kind of addicted to the, I'll call it easy money to finance growth. The reality is it's going to get tougher and tougher. If consumers want advice, we're talking about personalization. We talk about segment personalization. Now think of micro personalization within that market. Why is it that every bank I go to, if I go to a TD, and every TD has the same layout, the same products, the same services, RBC, right? Why? That market, that community may be very different from that branch to the one down the street. Why is it though the same products are being promoted? Why can't we create environments that talk to different need states of those customers? And so creating a model that where advice is at the center is, I believe, the future of retail banking. It's what's going to drive that stickiness. I'm going to end up here. You can download the report. And I'd be happy to come to your offices and present the deeper dive. I've done that with a couple of financial institutions. It's an eye-opener. So be brave if you're going to invite me. Does anybody have any questions? Good. Got 5 minutes.
Hi, JP. Great presentation. Thank you. Just a quick question. You talked a lot about the competitive landscape, the degree of competition around these key drivers of great experience. How do you see banks needing to differentiate on their unique promises and creating connection to the brand based on emotional attributes, which I know you were talking about yesterday in some of your questions too?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think it's tough. The easy part was 1 to 1,000, 1 to 1,000,000, right? Do an app, do some slight personalization. That's it. That's the easy job. The tough job is one-to-one, right? And one-to-one where you're reprogramming your staff to think differently. That's a tough challenge. That's a tough one. Universal bankers have never succeeded. Why? Because they still think transaction. So to answer your question, it starts with the value proposition the institution has. Very much, regulated industry, but there's still, areas of opportunity where financial institutions can deliver value, right? When you think of advice, you could break that advice into 20 segments of values that you can then own one and differentiate yourself. So it starts there. Then I asked this morning this question about how do you link mission and vision to how you guide the organization. Well, if you've got the value proposition clearly defined, then it's a lot easier then to measure how people deliver that value proposition. And that's how you shift the mindset, because what gets measured gets repeated, what gets rewarded, what gets measured gets done, what gets rewarded gets repeated is so true. And so if you can create those reward mechanisms that line up with your value proposition. And then finally, we're so focused on the functional, start digging deeper into the emotional equity of your brand, understanding how people feel about your financial institution, and also the pain points through their life journeys. And because they're different depending on those life moments. It could be anxiety, it could be confusion, it could be being overwhelmed if they got to pick pick within 5 insurance policies. These are big decisions, right, that affect their lives. Hopefully I've answered your question. Any other questions? Yeah.
It's a great presentation, thank you. My question is, you talked about the attrition between those who only use online banking compared to those who visit branch. Is it across all age segment, number one? And number two, related to that is, have you seen banks that can provide online experience to a level or an extent that minimizes, if not eliminate, the need for the customers to visit the branch? And I say this from personal experience because my primary banking used to be one that had a lot of, and still has a lot of branches. But every time I would walk in, such a big line, almost to an extent that I felt like they don't want me to walk into a branch, because every time I would go, I would see fewer and fewer tellers. And then so this is Bank of America, and maybe that's their policy. Switched over to Capital One, amazing online experience. I've rarely ventured into their branch, but anytime I need to talk to a human or do any transaction, it's a seamless, wonderful experience online.
To answer your question, I truly believe it depends on the relationship you're looking for in that institution. So, Capital One, they make their money on credit cards. I had this conversation in China because we're doing a flagship 3-story bank, and we've got a Starbucks at the bottom. They're all excited. I'm going, guys, it's going to be a Starbucks renting space. It's not going to drive any traffic up into the branch. So it depends on the relationship that they want. So Capital One is a credit card relationship. It's not a banking relationship. They don't even talk to you when you're in there. I did audits of them, but if I want a relationship and I want them to solve my anxieties about my future, they're going to want to talk to someone. I may want to have a follow-up conversation virtually with them, or I may start the conversation virtually, but when it gets into the weeds, I want empathy. I want to look at you in the eyes. I want to know that what you're telling me is true, that I have confidence in the recommendations you're making. You can't get that digitally. Now, maybe 20 years from now, you're going to have this lie analysis going on as you're having your conversation. Oh, they're lying. But right now, that's not happening. So, and an interesting insight just to build on that. So we asked them, where do you get advice? My bank, here in Canada, the bank, my family and friends, we all know that. My gut feeling, 17% said, my gut feeling. Not my bank, not an advisor, my gut feeling. So my gut feeling is about body language, it's about visual cues, it's about how they make you feel. So it plays an important role. Hope I answered your question.
Thank you.
Yes.
I was going to say, just further to what branches are sometimes pushing the customer away, because I kind of feel the same thing, that sometimes
Yeah.
you'll go in and then they'll be like, well, you can do that online. It's like, no, but I'm here now. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm seeking you out, and it's like you're pushing the people away. So it's
Absolutely.
almost like you're almost inadvertently saying you're pushing online, which is a great channel and you need it. But is there something else that can be done at the branch level? Because I've been noticing too, there are more empty. There is less tellers, and is that a indication of the times changing? But at the same time, if the banks are there, then let the people come in and let them stay and service them there.
Yeah, it's a mindset. A branch is a cost center. It's not a growth center. I'm here to tell you you're wrong. It's a growth category. It's where you're going to drive your growth. It's not where you're going to drive your costs. If you think of it as a cost center, they're doing exactly that. Or they're going to push them. I remember TD, this is going to fail. They took the Tello line and they put two ATMs next. So you'd queue in and you had a choice of going to the real person. Guess what? Those two machines, after about 6 months, they were gone, because there's no way. If I have a choice, it's people. So, but it's a mindset. The mindset is the branch or cost center, and what we need to do is what? Reduce people in the branch. We were having this conversation with a bank in the U.S. Bless their soul, they were visionary. We talk about lobby greeters. And it says, we always recommend lobby greeters, specifically if you're going to a universal banker model, because there's no queue lines. And you need someone to greet them. And in the banks that we've done work for, we started with lobby greeters, and the first line item that was cut was lobby greeters. This institution said, no, that is the most important person. It's not the branch manager. That is the most important person. Not only do they greet you, they kind of triage. They set the tone for the relationship. They provide you advice. They actually reduce the time it takes to do banking, because they know what you're looking for. They may tell you, they may move you to an IATM or an ATM, because that's the most convenient. The lines are long. Let me walk you over here and let's do the transactional over here. I know you don't like ATMs, but Sally's going to be available later if you need, and I'll have her call you, right? That's the relationship customers want. But right now, most institutions are looking at the branch as a cost center. And it's a growth center. It's where growth happens. It's where all the important products that you're selling are being purchased. Any other questions? Yeah, gentleman over here.
I don't remember you being in all my meetings in the last 2 months, but I'm pretty sure you've been there. So the importance of the branch is a point well made. But also that the branch of today is not the branch of tomorrow. Right. And I'm curious as to what you think the branch of tomorrow looks like, and do fulfilling transactions, does that still play a role?
Yeah, it does, because the customers still come in to do transactions. The insight we had was that the Gen Z's ATM is their primary channel, so they visit the branch, they use the ATMs. And so just an insight there. So why are you talking to them about products that they have no interest in at the ATM if you got digital signage? You should be talking about travel credit cards and things that are interested to them, but you're talking about all kinds of other stuff. But anyway, put that aside. Transactions are still important because there's a job to be done and it builds that level of trust, but it comes back to people. The physical asset, it gives you permission to build a relationship with your customers. It is not the driver of that relationship. It is the enabler of that relationship. What is the driver of the relationship is the people you put in the branch. So if you have fewer people, if they're not qualified, if they're transaction mindset, then you're going to create a negative experience. And you're going to miss the opportunity. So when they're thinking, when you talk about stealth attrition, when they're thinking of those high value services you provide, you're not on the consideration set. Why would you be? You're not talking about advice, you're talking transaction. And you're doing that because that is the addiction you have on your business. That is the thing you need to wean yourself off, is those transactions. Because that's how you equate growth, financial value, security, right, to checking and savings. That's where banks have gotten into trouble when they didn't have enough of them. I get that. But there's got to be, we call it the trust ladder. There's a journey to transformation. It doesn't happen in one bold step. We map out those steps over a period of 10 years. We have the vision, then we have the steps, and then we have the metrics to measure those steps to know you're not ready to move to the next one, so don't. JCPenney, they went from here to there. They should have jumped a whole bunch of steps. Right. Any other question? Well, you guys have been awesome. I really enjoyed being here. I hope I didn't annoy too many of you on my questions. And people ask me, why am I get excited about working in the banking industry? It's probably one of the most complex industries, right? Travel and banking, but banking because you're dealing with the future of your customers. You have access to money that allows them to fuel their growth. And so, but you're also an industry that is very conservative that needs to change. Greatest opportunity to change. And someone's going to do that. Somebody's going to, it'll take one bank to do it that everybody else is going to follow. Thank you very much for your time.